What's up, guys, and welcome to the Rebalance podcast, where we dive into topics that matter most when it comes to overcoming struggles, injuries, and finding balance in your life. Everybody's idea of balance is that bit different, so my goal is to give you different perspectives, practical tips, as well as expert insights into what it means to live a balanced life. My name is Robbie Cassidy. I'm a physiotherapist and a health coach, and I've been helping people reignite their love for challenge, overcome their fear, and find more balance in their life through the process of self-development. So, let's get into it. What's up, guys, and welcome back to the podcast. On this episode of the podcast, we are going to look at how we can become a bit more creative in our rehab and why the creative process is going to be so important in this as well. And this is for everyone. This isn't for just people who are involved, like physios or therapists or whatever, chiros. This isn't just for those. This is for the people who want to take responsibility for their own rehab and have a better understanding of what to do and how to improve it going forward. Because when we think of rehab, oftentimes we think of the boring side of it, where you have to go home and you have to do your 3x10s and you're waiting to get back into your activity. So I want to talk a small bit about how you can become a small bit more creative in the way that you think about it. Okay, and the way if you're given exercises, or let's say if you haven't gone to the physio and it's just something small that you're working on yourself, and you want to have better ideas of how you can approach it. That's really what this episode is aiming to achieve. So to jump right into the episode, I guess what got this idea turning in my head was someone asked me, how can you make rehab less of a chore and more of like a journey, or more fun or more interactive? And if you do start to think of it as more of a journey where you're testing things and see how you feel with them, as well as pulling back and then changing that angle and then testing something else and see how you feel, and finding the approach that works best for you and is moving you in the right direction. You want to avoid this idea of being very reactive in your rehab. And what I mean by that is that if you are always looking for just, okay, right, like I had a good conversation during the week with a lady who was struggling with back pain, and she was looking for the ergonomic fixes. So in my opinion, that would be more of a reactive response to rehab, because you're basically just saying, okay, well, I'm having back pain in this position, I want to change the factors around this position as opposed to changing the back pain itself. So buying a new chair, buying a standing desk, or buying a kneeling chair, or whatever it is that you feel is going to help you, or a back brace, when instead you need to be more proactive about going after the issue that's contributing to it specifically, which is in a lot of cases is more to do with the nervous system and how it's reacting, especially when you're looking at a chronic or persistent injury. So in that case, I was really trying to get her to be a bit more creative. Okay, right, if you're going to use a standing desk, we need to incorporate more movements. Let's look at you, if you're going to be standing up, instead of just standing there and doing your typing, are we able to fit in things like where you're bending down, touching your toes and doing rotations, where you're getting a small bit more movement through the back and you're not just avoiding the back pain completely? And that was really important. And she noticed then as well, I got her doing it on the call, and she noticed that there was a big improvement. And then we were able to isolate something else, like, how's your breathing when you're doing that? And how's this? And then why don't we just try change your breathing while we do the movement? Or why don't we just focus on breathing specifically? So, it's this idea of, like, there's not one specific way to fix it. There's loads of different ways you can do it, as long as you're creative and as long as you have that creative mind. If you know that you're going to be sitting at a desk for an entire day, and let's say it's a day of meetings. I know everyone says sitting at a desk for the day, but oftentimes we're getting up and we're moving around. Well, hopefully we are. But if you know that that's the case, then what can you do at the desk to get you moving a small bit more? And it literally could be just you push your chair back and you go down into like a lunge position or squat position, and you're just messing around there for a second, and then you pop up and you feel better because of that. That's what I'm talking about when we become creative. It's not that you're sitting in the chair and waiting, okay, at 7 o'clock this evening, I'm going to do 3x10 glute bridges, I'm going to do 3x10 on my lunges, and I'm going to do 10 cat cows. This kind of very general prescription that happens a lot. And a lot of the time the general prescription works as well, so I'm not going to knock that either. I'm talking about issues that are more persistent, but you're only going to keep that up for a couple of weeks. You're not going to continue doing those every week for the year. But if you're a bit more creative and you're saying you do things that you enjoy, like tonight you're going to do those exercises because you don't have an opportunity to do anything else, but instead tomorrow you might be going for let's say you need to go to the shop, you might park your car a small bit further away so you can walk longer and get more distance in. A lot of the rules, the funny thing is that I often talk to mates of mine who are PTs and involved in weight loss or body transformation, and a lot of the time they're looking for these little simple techniques that they can incorporate. It's not the gym session that's going to make the biggest difference. It's, are you taking the stairs a couple of times a day? And these are the things they add up. So if you are creative in how you get in your exercise and your activity, as well as how you vary the movements and what you're doing with your body on a day-to-day, a lot of the times that's going to really amplify the effect of your rehab, and it'll amplify the stuff that you do otherwise. So the exercises that the physio has given you, it's going to make them more effective because you're doing these other things outside of it. Okay, so as I said, the pitfalls of having this kind of this routine that's monotonous, and that you're just overemphasizing the traditional exercises. You're doing the same things over and over again, and you're seeing a small bit of a result, but it gets boring. Okay, and that's what I'm trying to. That's the real thing here. Is like, when it gets boring, you're going to stop doing it. If you stop doing it, you're going to have less of an optimal outcome. And if we can make that outcome a bit more optimal and more positive, then you are going to be a lot more inclined to continue with the rehab. And it may not then become rehab specifically. It could be just, all right, these are part of my routines. This is something that I enjoy doing, which is really the goal in a lot of cases. You're trying to just make it part of your routine. Like when you go to if you're exercising, if you're just exercising specifically to lose weight, or if you're just exercising specifically because you think you have to exercise, then it becomes boring, and you're going to lose the interest in it. So that's why it's important to have a different goal when you're exercising, something that's a bit more enjoyable, something that'll keep you coming back, and it's long term. If you can keep it long term, that's where all the gains are made. Not many gains are made in the first 14 days of exercise, but a lot of gains are made in the first 6 weeks, and even more are made in the first year. Then obviously, as you continue to go through that, you can continue to develop your body and develop your mind at the same time. But you have to stay consistent, and if you're not enjoying it, you're not going to be consistent. So the philosophy is, and a lot of the time when I'm dealing with people, I'm trying to emphasize this philosophy of having fun with it, enjoying it, emphasizing that the earlier that you integrate tasks that are going to be enjoyable, things that you say that, okay, that was a bit of fun, the faster you will improve and the more committed you will be to it. There's definitely a relationship between enjoyment and adherence. If you don't enjoy it, you ain't going to do it. You're not going to do it that much anyway. You may do it just because you feel you have to do it, but if you enjoy it, you will be way more likely to do it, and you'll be way more likely to play around with it and try these different things. And this idea of that there's a one size fits all for everybody is I think is probably grounded in when you go to physio, okay, and you say I have a back issue or I have a knee issue. There's certain exercises that will hit the muscles around the area, and you see physios coming out with new exercises and stuff, and I like that idea because it does re-emphasize. Okay, well, I went to one physio and they gave me a certain pattern at work, like say hamstring bridges or lunges, which are excellent, really, really powerful exercises, and you can gain a lot from them. And then you go to someone else and they're like, well, let's go for a hamstring bridge off a foam roller with a high heel, which is one I've seen crop up a lot more recently. Now, obviously, it's going to hit different areas in that, but just the idea of having a new exercise to do, you're going to be more likely to do it because it's more interesting. It's not just the basic. So there is that side to it about having these new exercises are important as well. And I think the more involved you are with your rehab, the more you're going to enjoy it and the more you're going to adhere to it. And then the outcome that you want to get will become so much more achievable, okay? But you have to commit to it. That's the thing. You have to commit to it, obviously. And there's going to be times that it's going to be boring. But if you start to look at it as more of a creative process, then that gets rid of the boring part of it, because then I think humans in general are creative animals, and that's something that defines us really as being human. So I think if you can focus on, let's say, instead of just going to a physio to do your hamstring bridges, like that hamstring foam roller is a perfect one, but you could also do it like where you're holding a medicine ball and you're messing with a medicine ball at the same time. Or it could be a really simple one is, and I'll talk through as I go through these about like dual tasking, constraint-based rehab, like switching dominance, stuff like that. If you're able to have a balancing act of traditional ones, which are the normal exercises, and then the more innovative methods, things that you're playing, like you could be standing on one leg, popping a ball off a wall, or hand passing the ball to somebody, getting down, doing a lunge, up, catching the ball, down, or hand passing down, up, catch the ball. It could be that you're pucking, if you're playing tennis, or squash, you're hitting the ball off a wall, you have to touch the wall beside you before it comes back, and the same thing. That you have to do something in between rallies. If you can look at these little ways of like incorporating something that's going to be, right, it's going to help you improve and get to the point that you need to, but it's going to take your mind off of, I need to just go through this because I have to do this. Then it becomes a lot easier, okay? And this is really, I guess, it's about, when I'm talking about it, it's more about addressing these persistent issues as opposed to the specific issues. Because if you sprain an ankle, there's a lot of things you can do, and you can get very creative in the jumps and the dual tasking and all that. But there's certain elements that you have to go through anyway, certain strengthening elements. Or if you let's say injure your ACL, there's certain things that you have to do anyway to improve the range of motion, improve the strength, improve the coordination, all that around it. Definitely, and I'm not knocking that at all. I'm just saying when you start to get to the phase that you're able to get back into exercise, you're able to play around and try these other things, it's really important to do that. And I guess to look into it, to jump into the next part, what we're looking at is that innovation and fusion and mixing things together. So what does it mean? Now, one really simple one, and I mentioned it earlier on, is the idea of dual tasking. Okay, where you're doing two things at the same time once you're able to do it, but you're making it more enjoyable. Like, it could be that if you're playing basketball, you're standing on one leg and you're shooting hoops. You know, like, really simple. That's a very, very simple one. If it's handball, or if it's football, you could be hand passing and jump, land, hand pass, or someone throws a ball up, you catch it, you land, you hand pass, you push off to the side. Okay, where you're mixing a couple of different things in together, but your mind isn't just focused on, okay, I need to do 10 jumps on a single leg, because that can become boring. And how long are you going to continue doing that? Or it could be that you're practicing a lunge position, you need to lunge, so you're saying, okay, I'm going to jog out, hand pass a ball, go into a lunge position, reverse back, go into a lunge position, go to the left, go into a lunge position, go to the right, go into a lunge position. You know, this idea of mixing around it and adding a few things together to make it more enjoyable. The next one then is constraint-based rehab, and this one is fun because this is like, if we're working with kids, this actually can even be more enjoyable, but you can use it yourself as well. It's turning limitations into challenges. So what you're doing is you're trying to use just one side, or you're let's say the ground is lava, or there's a certain area that you can only stand on for so long. So when you're in a certain box, you can only be there for 3 seconds. When you catch a ball and you land, you only have 2 seconds on the ground before you have to get rid of that ball again and jump. One I love to add in with people, especially as we're doing the mobility one, is once they start to get comfortable with the mobility side of things and the exercises, is close your eyes and do the same exercise and see how well you're able to do it. Now, there's obviously closing your eyes and doing balance tasks, but if you're rehabbing a lower body or lower limb injury, whether it's hip, knee, or ankle, or even your back or whatever, if you try to close your eyes and do an exercise, once it's safe, obviously, it makes it so much more challenging, and you're relying a lot more on your proprioceptive system and your balance systems to take over. And just by doing that, you'll find that you're wobbling all over the place, you're falling, but it makes it more enjoyable. So it obviously has to be incorporated at the right time. But doing an exercise with your eyes closed, and even, okay, let's say you don't do the whole set. Let's say you have to do 3 sets of something. You might just do the last set or the first set with your eyes closed and see how that works for you. But just incorporating something simple like that will make a big difference, because it does. It's way more challenging, and just try it, literally. What's up, guys? Robbie here. I hope you are enjoying the podcast so far. I want to take a moment just to personally ask you for your help. If you're enjoying the podcast, would you be willing to share it with someone you think would love it too? Maybe a friend, family member on social media, or even if you just brought it up in conversation with someone you know. The recommendation means the world to us, and it's because of people like you that we get to be able to produce this podcast on a weekly basis. So thank you so much for your support so far, and I would love if you could help us reach even more people who could benefit from it too. Really appreciate you, and we're going to jump straight back to the podcast. Pick an exercise that's relatively safe and close your eyes and do it. Like single leg hops with your eyes closed is a nice one to try out. You're not going to catch a ball because you're going to get split in the face, break your nose or something, but if you can do other exercises, ones that are more like that are safe, and you close your eyes, it makes them so much more challenging. Otherwise, it's a dominant switch. I love this idea of dominant switch. That's a funny word. I love this idea of switching and working with your opposite side. So like if you have your left shoulder hurt, trying to work with your left hand in a lot of cases where you're opening doors, you're picking stuff up, you're brushing your teeth with your left hand, doing things with your left hand that you wouldn't normally do. That's a nice way of changing it, because it's challenging on your brain, and it's getting you to work it in positions that it hasn't been worked in. And a lot of times when an injury happens, there's certain parts of that area, let's say the joint, around the joint, that isn't as inclined to work. okay, during a movement. Because pain is an inhibitor. Jesus, I struggle with that word, but it is. Pain's an inhibitor for muscles in a lot of cases. And if you start to use your left hand doing these exercises, because ones you haven't done in general before, it just becomes you become a lot more confident in using it, and you're hitting little movements, and your brain is obviously figuring out those movements at the same time. All the muscles are working to stabilize the joint and control the movement. You often build up a strength and a control and a coordination there that you can't do otherwise. Well, you can do otherwise, but it's not going to be as inclined to do it. Okay, so just like try this tonight. Try brush your teeth with your left hand. Even if you don't have a shoulder injury, just try it and see how challenging it is. Because it is a lot more awkward than you'd expect. And it's nice to be ambidextrous in that way of being able to play over and back, while at the same time you're getting a bit more creative in your rehab, because your shoulder's weak in let's say with flexion and internal rotation, something like that, where it struggles. Or for a lot of people, it could be flexion and external rotation. So for that one, it's that, okay, instead of just going up and doing all these banded exercises, why don't you just try practicing catching and throwing a ball off the wall, okay, or bouncing a ball on a table with your left hand and trying to catch it. Just feel how awkward it is to do that. I'm doing it here at the same time. I'm beside a window, so if there's anyone looking in the window, I'm going to look like an absolute psycho. But if you are like trying to bounce a ball off a table or throw a ball and catch it with your opposite hand, really simple ones, but it goes a long way. Things for lower limb is like double stepping on the stairs. I love this one. If you feel that you need to, and this is a good one for people who have tight hamstrings. I think this is a great one for people who have tight hamstrings, because you kind of bring it through that lengthened position, and then you start to strengthen it through that lengthened position, where you step up on your right, you step one step up on your right step, or on your right leg, and you take 2 steps with your left. So you skip a step. So you're really overextending. It's like a long lunge, and then you're pulling yourself up. And then you do the same thing again. Trying to mess around with it, that you're double stepping on stairs, or you're doing a hop challenge where you're like hopscotch, but you're hopping forward into a circle, trying to get a certain distance over and back and along. Another one, really simple one, if you have a certain distance that you know you have to go, let's say it's like hop for 30 meters, at the start it might take you 20 hops, and then looking to challenge yourself to see how few hops you can do it in where it's still safe. That's a nice one for like a lower limb ACL injury, or even an ankle injury, because it's challenging, but you have to manage the volume and intensity. So you're not going to do it early on where you're really getting them to challenge themselves, but as they really progress through the rehab and they're getting back to sport, or you're trying to integrate more sport-specific exercises in your own rehab, that's a nice one to do, where you have a certain distance and you're trying to reduce the amount of hops that you do to get over that distance. And you can do it on the pitch as well. It's very challenging, and obviously be safe. And on that idea of being safe, it really comes back to that control to chaos continuum of where you're working. You're starting with controlled exercises, and then things that are really simple to do, as I was saying, like you're not just going to go in and close your eyes straight away. And then you start introducing these kind of unpredictable sides of it, where you have external objects where they're catching stuff and throwing it, or interaction with other people, like where you have to catch a ball and take a tackle, or you have to sidestep somebody before you integrate into a full game. It's so important to have those little elements along the way. And when you're looking at control to chaos, the other side of it is that volume and intensity. You might be able to do that for a minute, but if you try to do that for 15 minutes, you're at a high chance of injury. It's like, this is what happens to people a lot. This is a little side one. Is they'll say, oh, I feel I can do that, or that, like I feel I can jump into that drill, and I'm 100%. And that's great. You might be 100% to jump into a full contact drill in let's say football or rugby or something like that, or hurling. But you might not only be able to stay in that because of the cognitive demand of it for a minute or 2 minutes. But after that 2 minutes, your body's reactions and everything, because it's not used to it, it's been out of it for a while, starts to drop off. And now you need to pull back and give it a chance to recover. But what people will do is, because they were able to do it for the 2 minutes, they feel they can do it for the 15 minutes. And that's where it comes back to managing your volume and intensity. And to segue back to the creative side, when you become more creative with your rehab, you start to get that cognitive test as well, where you are able to use focus as a marker of progress. So it's like, okay, you can do that for 2 minutes, but how do we build it up so you can do it for 5 minutes? How do we build it up so you can do it for 10 minutes? And what you do then is you come back into your kind of rehab setting or your home or wherever you are after training, you yourself, and obviously to the physios. And then you say, how can I increase the cognitive demands? So I have to really focus on what I'm doing here a lot more. So that could be, you look back at your dominance, you look back at your dominance switch, you look back at your constraint-based rehab, you look back at your dual tasking, and then you start to build it up again, and then you reintegrate yourself again. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense to people, where it's like, it's not just a physical demand, it's the cognitive demand as well that takes it out of you. And if you can manage that, and you can manage that outside of training, then it becomes a lot easier to get back into training when you are there. So hopefully that makes sense. But there is so many elements to this, but really what I want you to focus on as much as you can is see how creative you can become when you're doing these things. And if you enjoy it, if you can play around with exercises, if you understand there's no perfect way to do anything, then you will start to realize that your rehab can become a lot more enjoyable. Little one, using a trampoline in rehab. Why is that not used enough? It's such a good it's so enjoyable first, and it's such an excellent way of working on coordination, power, strength, everything, but it's not used. That's a really simple one that just popped to mind there right at the end of this podcast, because I'm going to finish up on this podcast right now. But if you can start to incorporate them more into your sessions and your day-to-day, where you're planning like going for hikes, or you're planning on, that, okay, I can run for 5K, or I can run for 10K, so now I'm going to come back, I'm going to run a 5K, but I'm going to run it on a trail, where it becomes a lot more challenging. Maybe not 5K on a trail now if you haven't done that in a while, because that could be a lot. But those little changes go a long, long, long way, and it'll keep you from getting re-injured as well. That's the next thing, because you're building up a lot more tolerance in a lot more scenarios. That's the goal. So be creative, mix them together, step in and out of training when necessary. How can you create an exercise or sequences of exercises that both hit the area but are also fun to work on? Don't forget about the cognitive demand of a sport or an activity, because that can also increase your likelihood of injury if something is extremely cognitively demanding and you haven't done it in ages. And even though your physical is up to a certain point, the nervous system is getting drained when it becomes more cognitively demanding. Yep, that is all for me. Hopefully that makes sense to you for now. If it doesn't, guys, please reach out to me on Instagram at The Mobility Tutor, or you can email me at info@themobilitytutor.com. I know people will have a few more questions. If you have more specific cases or anything like that, just let me know, and I'll hopefully be able to help you or point you in the right direction of what you could do. But that is all from me today. Make sure you're enjoying your journey, your process. Make sure you're enjoying your activities and your exercise, and always understand that the body is so adaptable. It's so strong and it's so adaptable. If you put it in the right situation and you give it the right recovery, there's very, very, very little what you can do or what you can get to. Hopefully everyone enjoyed that, and I will chat to you all again next week. Have a good one. Okay guys, thank you so much for listening to today's podcast. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you're looking to learn more about what we do, as well as check out any of the mobility and rehab programs we have available, just head over to the description of this podcast and you will find a link to all the programs there. As always, thank you for listening, and I will chat to you all again in the next episode. Have a good one.